Listen up, everyone. I have to be completely honest with each and every one of you. This was the hardest list that I've ever put together so far in my career as a content creator. Now, I am a gigantic action movie fan, and when I sat down to make my master list that would inevitably be whittled down to the final draft, I just couldn't stop myself. I literally couldn't stop my hands from typing. I kept remembering all my favorite memories from my childhood and beyond. And by the end of it, I had nearly 50 movie scenes listed, and I knew that I had to have some restrictions. So I made the choice to pick one scene, and one scene only, from a notable franchise or an actor's career. So that means only one lightsaber battle, only one Jean-Claude Van Damme fight scene, and somehow only one scene from all the John Wick movies. So I had my work cut out for me, but I think I've put together a pretty solid list of the top 20 fight scenes of all time. So let's get to it. And kicking off this list is an absolute classic, an epic duel featuring the superb King Arthur against the feared legend that is the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And we begin by watching the knight dispatch a few red shirts before our hero arrives and attempts to recruit him on his quest for Camelot. But after the refusal, the two engage in a hilarious and bloody duel in which the mighty king proves more than a match for the Black Knight and literally unarms him. But even with both limbs scattered about, the Black Knight claims to have only a flesh wound and continues his attack by any means necessary. The knight even loses both of his legs, but we have a bloody, armless stump. He's still screaming taunts at the king as he triumphantly gallops away. He even threatens to bite his legs off. Now, if you thought that fanny packs were harmless, our number 19 scene proves that to be untrue. Now, after munching on some chapstick to channel his inner warrior, we watch Alpha Waymond open a gigantic can of whoop-ass on some unsuspecting security guards. It's a fairly quick affair, but one that showcases the imagination that made this movie a smash hit. It has great pacing and cinematography, and a small bit of slapstick thrown in there that makes this one fight that you can revisit over and over again. The strength in our number 18 fight really is the build-up. Now, throughout this movie, we can feel the tension rising, and it culminates in another famous fight that was certainly in consideration for this list, the famed airport battle where we see all of our Avenger heroes duke it out. But the reason that I chose this fight in particular to represent the entire MCU is because not only does it feature some of the best visuals that appear like panels from a comic jumping off the screen, but it also features the most motivated combatant we've seen thus far. Now, we have a traumatized and betrayed Tony Stark, and he's 100% out for blood. He's throwing everything that his $1 million Iron Man suit can dish out at these two super soldiers in an attempt to end the Winter Soldier's life. It's a long fight that changes location several times. We see weapons and basic hand-to-hand combat, and there's something in this fight for pretty much every comic book movie fan. We wait with so much anticipation through the beginning of this 2014 action masterpiece, The Equalizer, starring Denzel Washington as protagonist Robert McCall. Now, we know that this man possesses skills that make him a nightmare for people like the Russian mob who've been giving his friend all sorts of problems and leave her in a bloody pulp. So when he's finally forced into conflict with these men, it is well worth the wait. And it takes less than 30 seconds for McCall to cause all sorts of harm to these violent criminals. He shoots them, he stabs them, and he even utilizes a wine opener to leave one helpless guy severely screwed. And he's as efficient as he is ruthless, dealing with the scum of the world that he thought that he left behind years ago. The most famous fencing duel of all time is also likely the most polite. Inigo Montoya waits patiently for his adversary Wesley to climb all the way up to the top of the cliffside and eventually aids the man by throwing a rope and allowing him to catch his breath before they begin the duel. And while the very experienced warriors trade blows, a mutual respect begins to form as they call out each other's moves and styles and reveal that they're both actually fighting with their offhand. It's fast paced, it's well choreographed. This duel has many standout moments before Wesley inevitably proves to be the better swordsman, but ends up showing mercy by sparing his opponent. And this cements his defection to the side of our man in black and ultimately gains him his vengeance on the six-fingered man. It was extremely difficult to narrow the entire Rocky saga down to one single fight. Both Rocky and Apollo fights are legendary in their own right, and the fight in Part 3 against Mr. T's Clubber Lang may very well be the most satisfying to watch. However, to any child who grew up with these movies, the most feared opponent and biggest villain in the franchise has to be Ivan Drago. This superhuman Soviet powerhouse was built as an unstoppable killing machine, and we believed it after we watched him dispatch of Apollo so easily in the ring. Now, this level of threat to Rocky's life, paired with him seeking revenge for Apollo's death, added stakes to their final confrontation that felt borderline superhero-esque. Rocky being the ultimate underdog good guy versus this Russian machine hell-bent on killing every man put in front of him. And hearing Duke screaming, "He's cut! He's cut!" still gives me goosebumps all these years later. There are many, many amazing fight scenes in the underrated Jet Li action film Kiss of the Dragon, but the standout for me is the 2v1 battle against the platinum-haired twins. One large and powerful, while the other small and lightning fast. These two certainly don't pose much of a threat solo, but their joint attack on our hero allows for several ambush hits, and it keeps them in the fight. But once Johnny Boy dispatches of the smaller combatant, it takes little time for him to finish off the larger fighter with a brutal neck snap and badass walk away. The Tommy vs. Mad Dog fight from 2011's Warrior is as surprising as it is vicious and short-lived. We had yet to see what the youngest Conlon brother was capable of, but I can't imagine many envisioning his total dismantling of a pro fighter in his own gym. This fight is about as satisfying as one can be, in large part because of the inflated ego of Mad Dog and his insulting of Tommy prior to their engagement. And the follow-up fight later in this movie proves without a shadow of a doubt that this outcome was no fluke and Tommy was the real deal. Man, that hubris, it'll get you every time, Mad Dog. We knew how this fight ended before it even began, but that didn't stop the Hector versus Achilles showdown from being the standout fight sequence in a movie filled with amazing action and jaw-dropping spectacles. Angry that Hector murdered his young cousin, the fully motivated Achilles almost toys with Hector throughout the first phase of this fight, showing why the legend of his name would live on for thousands of years after his death. Slowly but surely, he wounds and disarms the very capable warrior until he's finally ready to deal the lethal blow. This fight is filmed beautifully and the choreography is masterful. The fluidity of both men's movements is the highlight for me, and it's obvious both trained extensively for this fight. Amazing work, gentlemen. There was 0% chance I'm doing a greatest fights of all time list and not including Donnie Yen somewhere. The fight I chose comes from his 2008 movie IP Man and sees our enraged hero fully unleashed for the first time. Showing none of the restraint we've seen thus far in this film, he challenges 10 black belts and proceeds to mercilessly strike down each and every one. The sequence is shot so that none of the action is missed, and the sound design perfectly highlights the impact of his lightning-fast strikes. At times, you can barely see his fist moving, they're going so fast, and I almost feel sorry for some of these guys as they are beaten to within an inch of their lives. Wrong place at the wrong time for sure. Again, I found it extremely difficult to pick just one fight from the Kill Bill saga, but ultimately I landed on the one that is likely the most remembered by fans and talked about, our hero's dismantling of the Crazy 88's gang. Now, already battle-worn and facing an overwhelming number of disadvantages, we watched this master assassin tear through no less than 30 goons with her Hanzo sword. This fight is long, it's bloody, and it's wildly entertaining and features Uma Thurman's The Bride character at her most focused and deadly. And it may not be the most believable fight on our list. There are several moments where other fighters could have interrupted her attacks, but that doesn't matter. It's as stylized of a fight as they come, and it's memorable for its fast pace and gallons of blood from the many, many limb removals and decapitations. Hell, one dude even gets cut in half. Once again, we have an action legend with countless amazing fights to choose from, Jackie Chan. Now, his style is as recognizable as the giant smile that commonly appears on his face. This master of the environment commonly uses creative ways to utilize his surroundings to inflict as much pain as possible on those he's engaged with. And the best example that I could find of this is the ladder sequence from 1996's First Strike. And as with most Jackie Chan fights, this one is quick, brutal, and changes location several times. And the highlight of this fight is when our hero, Inspector Chan, snatches a ladder and then proceeds to smash, dive, and swing this massive weapon with all the skill and beauty one would more commonly associate with a bow staff or nunchucks. Now, I never thought that a ladder could be wielded in such a way, but that's truly the beauty of a Jackie Chan movie. He can turn anything into a weapon. 1972's The Way of the Dragon features two martial arts icons at the top of their game facing off in a 1v1 to end all 1v1s. You've got Bruce Lee's Tang in an attempt to save his family from a group of gangsters facing off against Chuck Norris's American fighter Colt, who was hired to kill Tang after multiple failed attempts to do so by others. And the backdrop for this gargantuan fight is the Roman Colosseum, and that just adds to the spectacle as these combatants go back and forth, delivering their very best in an attempt to subdue the other. And by the end of this nearly 7-minute long fight, both men have landed significant strikes and had the advantage at one point or another. But it's Tang, of course, who comes out on top after breaking Colt's arm, his leg, and then finishing him off with a brutal neck snap. But what the hell was up with that cat, though? Anyone? The knife fight in Act 1 of John Wick 3 Parabellum was easily my choice for this action-centric franchise, as it features some of the most brutal kills we've ever seen. We ditched the guns and headshots for a more up-close and personal knife duel between John and several would-be assassins, in a weapon archive of sorts, so the knives are in abundance. Our heroes and villains attempt to smash and slash their way to victory. Unfortunately for those would-be bounty hunters, our man Wick is more than capable of handling anything these guys can dish out, easily killing every single one of them with increasing levels of brutality, culminating in a very slow, wince-inducing eye stab and the dopest axe throw that I've ever seen on camera for one final kill shot. 2011's The Raid Redemption features several brutal fight scenes, but the one that stood out to me most was the 2v1 fight between Rama and his brother Andy and the gang enforcer known as Mad Dog. This fight is a masterclass in shot choice and choreographed fight sequences that feel authentic. At no point whatsoever while I was watching this fight for the first time did I feel like any of the combatants were waiting for their turn. You know, it all felt real. It felt brutal and violent, and the music is present but does not overshadow the sound design that makes the viewer feel each strike these men endure. And there were several moments where I thought this fight was over, especially when Mad Dog is stuck in the neck with a fluorescent light tube. But to watch this man barely alive and still ruthlessly dangerous was equal parts unbelievable and amazing. So let's just go with amazing. And the brothers end up subduing the crazed murderer and deal the definitive blow by slicing his neck the rest of the way open and allowing him to bleed out for good. 2000's action masterpiece Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon won several Oscars, including Best Cinematography, so it should come as no surprise that it features one of the most beautifully shot sword fights ever put to film. The fight between Jen and Shu is breathtaking to watch and features some of the finest swordsmanship I've ever seen. And I can't imagine how long it took to shoot this scene, but it's worth it because the execution is superb. Fluidity doesn't even begin to describe the movement here. They wanted to show what two next-level swordsmen could do 1v1, and what comes of it is a duel for the ages. And it's really only because of a broken sword and the intervention of Master Li that this conflict is eventually concluded. Otherwise, we may have seen the ultra rare double KO. The second most badass sci-fi fight scene features two heroes engaged in a friendly sparring session, but that does nothing to lessen the epicness of this moment. In the first Matrix movie, Neo is told by Morpheus that he is the One, a Jesus-like figure who is destined to save humanity from the evil machines. However, to get there, he must unlock his true potential. In an attempt to do just that, Morpheus teaches him the ways of the Matrix and its rules in the only way he knows how, with his fist. The audience is meant to believe we are watching two men who literally know every single form of hand-to-hand combat, and the choreography does this in spades. Their hands move so fast it almost seems inhuman, and the ability to bend or break the rules of the Matrix lead to some iconic shots courtesy of the famed bullet time slow-mo. Now, this fight may end more peacefully than a lot of our others on this list, but that does not stop it from being near the top of the badass meter on execution and style. If only the sequels lived up to this one. The only reason that this 7-minute long one-take fight scene in Atomic Blonde isn't number one is because it fell victim to nostalgia. And purely based on enjoyment and execution, this fight scene checks every box one could ask for. You got a badass good girl? Check. Brutal hand-to-hand combat? Check. Guns and various weapons? Check, check. An insurmountable number against a single protagonist? Check. Oh, and did I mention that this is a nearly 7-minute long one take? Add in the fact that the director brilliantly decided to eliminate any and all music from this sequence and asked the sound department instead to make us feel everything. Every impact or arm break hits hard, and every slice cuts deep. And by the end of this fight, the absolutely stunning Charlize Theron is a bloody mess, but she saves her ward and leaves a couple dozen henchmen at her feet. That's a fair trade, I'd say, and a job well done, both in the movie and out. In all of the Star Wars saga, there was a clear choice for which fight should represent the film series. The first duel between father and son, Darth Vader against Luke Skywalker in Empire Strikes Back. Now, it's clear that the elder Sith Master is toying with the young Skywalker in the hopes of turning him to the dark side, but it's still a thoroughly enjoyable conflict with beautiful cinematography and lighting, several changes in location, as well as one of the most famous movie twists of all time. Now, I don't know that there's a more famous moment in all of Star Wars, and although their second duel in Return of the Jedi is a more even fight, I still prefer this first encounter because of its importance to the greater Star Wars universe. And plus, I'm a sucker for a good story where the bad guy wins, and there's no doubt Vader wins this duel physically and mentally. Luke is left without a hand and now questions everything his mentor Ben told him. And it really shows the resilience of our hero Luke, that he's able to pick himself up, continue his training to become a Jedi, and then face down Vader in the final chapter of the original trilogy. Truly iconic. The final fight of the Kumite tournament between Frank Dux and Chong Li in Bloodsport is to me the greatest fight ever put to film. By this point, the audience is emotionally invested in the outcome because of our desire not only to see Frank triumphant, but also to see Chong Li, played brilliantly by the legendary Chinese actor Bolo Yeung, pay for his unnecessary and extreme violence against Frank's friend and goofball Jackson. Now, this is peak Van Damme, and having him battle a monster like Chong Li for the championship is peak 80s action camp, and I'm here for it. Now, the music builds as we watch our hero pummel the bad guy, but of course the villain has to try and cheat to win, and of course Van Damme handles this by screaming as loud as he can, and then suddenly he can sense his enemy. But it doesn't matter because it's all shot and choreographed so well that even after 4 decades, this film still gets the blood pumping and gets an audible reaction out of me nearly every time Frank lands that final blow. So guys, that's my list. That's my 1 through 20. Again, this list was upwards of 50 entries. So of course there's a couple that I left off, a couple that I wanted to put on, but I couldn't. I do have a couple of honorable mentions. The News Team Showdown in Anchorman was definitely in consideration. Rama versus the Machete Gang in The Raid was also in consideration, but I had to pick one. Duel of the Fates, of course, was in consideration, but I picked, Luke versus Vader. The IP Man versus Master Hung in IP Man 2 is a great fight, but I had to pick one of the IP Mans. And of course, the elevator fight in Captain America the Winter Soldier was a strong contender for the MCU representative, but I ended up going, with the triple header because I thought it had a little more emotional punch to it. But anyway, that's my list. Thank you all so much for watching or listening, whatever it is you're doing. If you're catching this on Friday or Saturday, I hope you're having a great weekend. If you like the video, please like the video. It helps the channel. And if you're new here, please think about subscribing. All it does is take a second to push that subscribe button. We are so close to my first big goal of 500 subscribers. And then I have a big surprise for everybody. So please, if you're new here, help me reach that goal. Subscribe to the channel. I got tons of stuff planned. So until then, be good people, be good to each other, and I'll catch you next time.